It was supposed to be the perfect break. 1 week of beaches, cocktails, and late-night laughter before the grind of finals began again. For 20-year-old Sudiksha Konanki, a biology major at the University of Pittsburgh, the trip to Punta Cana, Dominican Republic, wasn't just a vacation. It was her first real taste of freedom. On March 6, 2025, just after midnight, she was seen alive for the last time. Born in India and raised in Virginia, Sudiksha was the kind of person people remembered for her calm presence. She excelled at everything she touched, from research projects to charity events, yet she was known for her humility, her soft-spoken kindness. Friends described her as the glue of their group, the one who never missed birthdays, the one who listened when everyone else was too busy talking. When her friends planned a spring break getaway to the Caribbean, she hesitated at first. There was a midterm project due, a research paper is half finished. But her friends insisted, "You need this, Sudiksha, just 1 week to breathe." And so she went. They booked rooms at the Hotel Rio Republica, an all-inclusive adults-only resort known for its wild nightlife, beachfront bars, music that pulsed long after midnight, and the constant rhythm of waves against the sand. For 7 days, the girls planned to forget deadlines and lab reports, to dance under the stars and soak in the turquoise calm of the Atlantic. The first few days went as expected. Photos showed them smiling by the pool, laughing over buffets of tropical fruit and rum cocktails. They posted group selfies tagged Spring Break 2025, the kind of snapshots that would later feel almost cruel in their innocence. Then came the night of March 5th, leading into the early hours of March 6th, the night everything changed. Around 4 a.m., as the resort's bars started closing, a power outage swept through Rio Republica. Lights flickered, music cut. For several seconds, the beachfront fell into near-total darkness. Guests later described the moment as eerie, just the sound of waves and scattered voices in the dark. Most people returned to their rooms, but some, drawn by the moonlight and the sudden quiet, made their way toward the ocean. Among them was Sudiksha. CCTV footage from one of the functioning cameras, one that wasn't affected by the outage, caught her walking toward the beach with a small group of people. At her side was a man she'd met earlier that evening, Joshua Steven Riibe, a 22-year-old from the US, also on vacation. The two had been seen talking at the bar earlier, laughing in the way strangers do when vacation lowers their guard. According to friends, there was nothing unusual about it. Sudiksha was friendly with everyone. At 4:15 a.m., the last clear piece of footage showed her and Riibe heading down the wooden pathway that led directly to the shore. She was wearing a light dress and sandals. He walked a few steps behind her, carrying what looked like a pair of shoes. That was the last verified image of Sudiksha Konanki alive. What happened in the minutes after that is the mystery that would grip 2 countries. When the sun rose over Punta Cana that morning, the resort came back to life. Music restarted, staff prepared breakfast buffets, and guests returned to the beach. But Sudiksha's friends noticed her absence almost immediately. Her phone was still on the nightstand. Her bag was untouched. Her bed was never slept in. At first, they assumed she had stayed out late, maybe wandered the beach, watching the sunrise. But by 6:30 a.m., worry turned to panic. They called her name through the corridors, checked with hotel staff, and then went to the front desk. Within an hour, the resort's security office had been alerted. By 8 a.m., police were called. That same morning, one of the resort guards mentioned a detail that would later become crucial. Around 4:30 a.m., he had seen a lone man walking back from the beach, drenched, disoriented, and barefoot. That man was identified as Joshua Riibe. When questioned, Riibe gave his version of events. He said they had walked along the shore talking, that she'd waded knee-deep into the water to feel the waves. Then suddenly, a large wave came in, knocking them both off balance. He claimed he tried to grab her hand but couldn't, that he inhaled seawater, choked, and eventually made his way back to shore, vomiting and exhausted. He said he looked for her, called her name, then, disoriented, sat on the sand until he passed out. But almost immediately, something felt wrong. That night, no one else reported large waves. The tide reports confirmed calm waters, smooth and low. The beach, according to staff, was eerily still. And while the power outage did create darkness, no one else claimed to have seen or heard any signs of distress near the ocean. By noon, police had seized Riibe's passport, pending further questioning. The US Embassy was notified, and back in Virginia, Sudiksha's parents received the call every parent dreads. Their daughter was missing, last seen on a Dominican beach in the middle of the night. They were on a plane within 24 hours. News of her disappearance spread fast. Social media posts turned from photos of sunsets and laughter to desperate pleas for information. Local news stations in both the US and India picked up the story, labeling it the Punta Cana mystery. Meanwhile, investigators pored over every piece of footage from that night. But between the power outage and the beach's blind spots, there were gaps in the surveillance timeline, critical minutes where no cameras captured anything. By the time the first day of searching ended, all anyone knew for certain was this. At 4:15 a.m., Sudiksha Konanki walked into the dark toward the ocean. By sunrise, her friends were packing for breakfast. And Sudiksha, the bright, kind, 20-year-old student whose life was just beginning, was gone. The sun rose over Punta Cana with its usual postcard calm, the kind that makes you forget anything bad could happen in a place this beautiful. But that morning, inside Hotel Rio Repubblica, something was terribly wrong. At 6:30 a.m., the sound of knocking echoed through the hallways. Sudiksha's friends, 5 college students who had traveled with her from the University of Pittsburgh, were moving from room to room, panic rising with every unanswered call. Her phone was still in the room, her sandals were by the door, her bed untouched. They searched the breakfast area, the pool, and the beach. Nothing. By 7 a.m., they notified the resort staff. Within 30 minutes, security guards began combing the shoreline. And then came a strange detail. One of the night guards mentioned seeing a man alone near the beach before dawn, soaked, barefoot, and visibly shaken. That man was Joshua Steven Riibe, a 22-year-old from the United States, who had been seen on surveillance footage walking toward the beach with Sudiksha just hours earlier. When police arrived around 8 a.m., they found Riibe in his hotel room, sitting on the edge of his bed, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. His story began with 5 words: "We went into the water." He told investigators that around 4:15 a.m., he and Sudiksha had gone for a walk along the beach. According to him, she wanted to feel the waves. The two waded knee-deep into the ocean. Then, without warning, he said, a large wave came in, knocking them both down. He claimed he tried to grab her hand but couldn't. He said the water filled his mouth, that he choked, that he somehow made it back to shore, coughing, vomiting, disoriented. He said he searched for her but saw only darkness and foam. Then, exhausted, he sat down in the sand and must have passed out. But something about his story immediately stood out. That night, there were no large waves. Tide reports confirmed calm seas. The water off Punta Cana had been flat and still. A gentle current, no rip or undertow strong enough to pull anyone away. Even locals who worked the beachfront said they had never seen anyone vanish like that under those conditions. And yet, Riibe insisted. He said he felt her slip from his grip. That one moment, she was there, and the next, she was gone. By 10 a.m., local authorities had taken his passport and confined him to the resort while the investigation began. The Dominican Policía Turística launched an immediate search effort, fearing a drowning. Meanwhile, hotel security pulled the night's footage. On the recordings, Sudiksha and Riibe could be seen walking together from the resort's pool area toward the beach. The timestamp read 4:14 a.m. A few guests lingered in the background, laughing, still holding drinks. Then, as they reached the end of the boardwalk, the point where sand met sea, the cameras went dark. That was when the power outage hit. According to resort staff, the blackout had started just after 4:15 a.m., cutting power to several surveillance cameras and outdoor lights. For roughly 12 minutes, there was no video, no illumination, no electronic record of what happened next. When power was restored, the beach appeared empty. That gap, just 12 minutes, became the center of the entire investigation. By midday, Sudiksha's parents in Virginia were notified. Her mother's first reaction was disbelief. Her father booked flights within the hour. They would land in the Dominican Republic less than 24 hours later, desperate for answers, clinging to the hope that maybe she had wandered off or gotten hurt and was waiting to be found. But as the hours passed, hope began to fade. Back at the resort, Riibe was questioned again. This time, his version changed slightly. He said she had walked in first, that he had followed behind her. Earlier, he had said they were side by side. Later, he said he tried to save her, then admitted he wasn't sure what happened after the wave hit. He said he was dizzy, that everything went black. To investigators, it was the start of a pattern, small inconsistencies that didn't match up. If he was disoriented, why had the guard seen him walking back from the beach minutes later, upright and steady? If the current was so strong, why hadn't he been swept farther out himself? And if he had called out for help, why hadn't anyone else on the property heard a single sound? When questioned about injuries, he showed no cuts or bruises, no signs of struggle or impact, just salt stains on his shirt and wet sand clinging to his shoes. By afternoon, the beach had been sealed off. Police, lifeguards and hotel staff formed search lines. Drones were launched to scan the nearby coastline. Divers entered the shallows. But there was no sign of Sudiksha. No torn clothing, no footprints leading away, no struggle marks in the sand, nothing. As news spread, other guests began talking. Some said they'd heard arguments on the beach that night. Others mentioned seeing flashlights, though none of it could be verified. The only solid evidence remained that final frame of surveillance footage, Sudiksha walking toward the ocean with Joshua Riibe. By evening, the local police spokesperson gave a brief statement to reporters. A young woman has disappeared near the Rio Republica resort. A companion was present at the time of the incident. Investigation ongoing. Behind the calm press release, tension was growing. The US Embassy had become involved, monitoring the case closely. Rumors spread that the resort was under pressure to contain the story. Guests were told not to speak to the media. Staff were reminded to cooperate only through official channels. When Sudiksha's parents arrived the next day, they found themselves stepping into a maze of conflicting statements. Her friends insisted she would never have gone swimming that late. She was careful, afraid of deep water. Her father asked the police captain one question: if she drowned, where is she? The officer had no answer. And as they spoke, another detail surfaced, one that would cast deeper doubt on the wave story. The Dominican Meteorological Institute released that night's ocean data, wave height under 0.3 meters. Wind speed negligible. The sea was calm enough for a candle's flame to stand steady. So what had Joshua Riibe seen? What had really happened between 4:15 and 4:27 a.m. when the cameras went dark and the ocean swallowed its secret? That question hung over the investigation, over the resort, and over every sleepless night that followed. Because by the time her parents stood on that same stretch of sand where she vanished, the tide had erased everything. Her footprints, her scent, her story, replaced by one man's words and a silence that refused to break. By sunrise, the shoreline at Hotel Rio Republica was no longer quiet. Yellow tape fluttered in the wind. The same stretch of sand that hours earlier had been a place of music and laughter now turned into a search zone. The disappearance of 20-year-old Sudiksha Konanki had already begun spreading beyond the resort walls. Within hours, it wasn't just hotel security scanning the beach. It was the Dominican National Police, Coast Guard, and tourism authorities, all converging on the same stretch of coastline. By that afternoon, what began as a local missing person alert had turned into one of the largest coordinated search operations in Punta Cana's recent history. Helicopters circled above. Divers entered the shallows in coordinated grids. Drones swept over the turquoise water, scanning for anything. A bright color, a shadow, any sign of a body beneath the surface. But the ocean gave nothing back. From the first 24 hours, investigators knew they were running against time. The Caribbean currents, warm and deceptive, can shift small debris quickly. Still, the marine reports that night showed almost no current activity. If Sudiksha had drowned, her body should have resurfaced near the same spot within a day or two. That never happened. At the US Embassy in Santo Domingo, officials took notice. The case of an American college student vanishing under such controlled conditions on a resort beach with cameras and security patrols was unusual. Embassy representatives arrived to oversee the search, coordinating between local police and the FBI's legal attaché. The first step was to piece together the final known timeline. The surveillance footage recovered from the hotel showed Sudiksha walking with Joshua Steven Riibe at 4:14 a.m., heading toward the beach. Then, the blackout. For roughly 12 minutes, the power was out. When the cameras came back online at 4:27, both were gone from view. At 5 a.m., Riibe returned alone. He told police the same story: the wave, the fall, the panic. But as investigators compared his testimony with weather and tide reports, inconsistencies started stacking up. The National Meteorological Office confirmed calm seas that night, waves no higher than 1 foot and wind speed under 5 knots. No wave large enough to pull anyone under. Still, Riibe insisted she was swept away. By day 3, doubts began surfacing, not just among investigators, but among guests. Several who had been at the resort that night told reporters they'd heard no shouts for help. One tourist even mentioned seeing 2 figures walking near the shoreline around 4:30 a.m., but not entering the water. That same evening, Dominican authorities began to question whether a drowning had happened at all. If she had been taken by the sea, where were her belongings? Her clothes from that night were missing. Her phone was in her room, yes, but the small crossbody bag she carried out of the club with her was never found. The beach search team scoured the entire stretch of coast from Rio Republica to neighboring resorts. They recovered nothing. No clothing, no personal items, no trace of struggle. Meanwhile, in Virginia, her parents appeared on international news channels. Her mother, holding Sudiksha's photo, pleaded with anyone in Punta Cana to come forward. Her father said, "If she drowned, we should have her by now. This is not just the ocean. Someone knows something." The search intensified. On day 5, authorities expanded their grid. Divers combed waters up to half a mile offshore. A Dominican Navy vessel patrolled further out. Sniffer dogs were brought to search the coastline, trained to detect human scent from the waterline. Still, not one lead. Each day brought more questions and more contradictions. The resort management issued a statement claiming the blackout that coincided with her disappearance was part of scheduled maintenance. But guests contradicted this, saying the outage was sudden and unannounced, plunging entire wings of the resort into darkness for just under 15 minutes. If that was true, it meant someone had chosen an eerily precise window to walk toward the ocean, just when the lights and cameras failed. On day 6, a Dominican police spokesperson confirmed that Riibe's account had shifted slightly during questioning. He now said Sudiksha went into the water first, not him, that she was waist deep, and when he stepped closer, a wave hit them both. Earlier, he'd said they were knee-deep together. He added that he'd tried to pull her, but slipped. When asked about injuries, he showed none. To local investigators, that small change was enough to undermine his credibility. But lacking physical evidence, no body, no forensic signs of violence, no witnesses to a struggle, they couldn't charge him. And so the investigation continued in 2 directions, one team treating it as a potential accidental drowning, the other discreetly probing foul play. By day 8, frustration grew. The U.S. Consular Office requested additional resources. Dominican Marine units scanned over 30 kilometers of coastline. Locals said it was the most extensive search they'd ever seen, and yet the beach where it began remained the same, unmarked, empty, untouched by the clues they desperately needed. As the 10-day mark approached, officials made a quiet decision to scale back the search. The operation had cost thousands in manpower and resources. With no evidence of abduction or homicide and no trace of a body, they concluded the most probable explanation was drowning. But the investigators themselves weren't convinced. One officer, speaking anonymously, told a journalist, "Bodies don't vanish in calm water. Not like that. Not without help." Meanwhile, online forums began to explode with speculation. Some said it was a trafficking case tied to reports of tourists disappearing along the same coast. Others suggested an inside cover-up, pointing to the blackout and missing surveillance footage. None of it could be confirmed, but the timing, the silence, and the lack of transparency only deepened the mystery. When Sudiksha's parents returned to Virginia, they did so without answers. The Dominican authorities promised to continue the investigation, but off record, local sources admitted the file was close to being marked inactive. In the end, the sea remained the only witness, and it refused to speak. Her friends from college held vigils on campus, lighting candles beside her favorite bench. Her professors described her as the kind of student who stayed late after class just to ask more questions. Now the only question left was one no one could answer. If the tide that night was calm, if the man with her survived without a scratch, if no body, no belongings, no trace were ever found, then what really happened to Sudiksha Konanki on that quiet stretch of beach in Punta Cana?